daily races, going nowhere, going nowhere. Their tears are filling up their glasses, no expression, no expression.
The year is 2001. The spit from the blowjob that got Bill Clinton impeached hardly had time to dry by the time old Georgie Boy Bush came Texas two-stepping into the Oval Office. America had long moved past the Cold War threat of communism and was in desperate need of a new boogeyman to justify its imperialist aims. And then, boom. 9/11 was a wet dream beyond the elite's wildest imagination. The fall of the World Trade Center buildings would become a symbolic event permanently woven into the fabric of the American psyche. Not only could this crisis be used to justify America's imperial ambitions, but it could also be used by the government to push through legislation like the Patriot Act, legislation the majority of representatives didn't even take the time to read in full before signing into law. And now, the entirety of the American public is under constant warrantless mass surveillance. Our data is collected and stored by the NSA. In airports, we are molested and probed and exposed. Intelligence about innocent American citizens is shared between federal and state agencies and fusion centers, profiling people along political and religious lines. And thanks to the National Defense Authorization Act, these same individuals can be indefinitely detained without due process if deemed a terror threat. The government used 9/11 as an excuse to create the Department of Homeland Security and as a justification for their multi-trillion-dollar wars of aggression in the Middle East. We were told that if we saw something to say something, and that we were either with Bush or the terrorists. They said that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and that if you have nothing to hide, well, then you have nothing to fear.
Anyways, Obama came and started a war or two or 7 and failed to deliver on pretty much every one of his campaign promises, and Trump did the same thing, just a little bit less polished, and things were going pretty normal for a post-9/11 world when holy shit. The cough heard around the world was fired off in Wuhan, changing the world as we knew it. Ever heard of a giant transfer of wealth, you fucking rube? While you were locked down in your shitty Rabbit Hutch apartment using your sink as a bidet because of the run on toilet paper, the billionaire class was chilling in their palatial estates, counting the money coming in. While your favorite mom and pop shops went under, they bought up the property for their multinational corporations. And not only did they get richer off this whole pandemic, but it created a global climate of fear and paranoia that is being exploited just like 9/11. And now we're told to stay home and to keep our distance. We're told that in order to survive this super lethal pandemic that we have to become a nation under house arrest. Leaders of the coronavirus response, such as Anthony Fauci, have floated the idea of immunity passports, where the results of antibody tests are kept in a large identification system, and those who are immune could be issued an immunity passport that confers certain privileges, such as returning to work. And vaccine IDs have also been proposed, and they operate in a similar manner. People have suggested screening checkpoints and contact tracing, better known as mass surveillance. Snitch hotlines have been created to rat on your neighbor for violating proper COVID protocols. Certain cities like Denver have assembled teams of investigators to patrol the streets and issue citations to people violating shelter-in-place laws. Virginia has been conducting surprise inspections on businesses. Police have been using drones to enforce social distancing. There have been fines and even time in jail for venturing out without a mask. There's been talk of thermal screenings in airports by the TSA, and many private companies are considering thermal screenings for their venues. Some state officials have considered using house arrest technology to ensure suspected coronavirus carriers don't break quarantine. Over 30 states have some form of mask mandate, and nearly all companies have mask mandates of their own. And some people such as Alan Dershowitz, have even suggested mandatory vaccines, or at least that they don't find any constitutional or legal issues with the idea of forced vaccinations.
Now look, thank you everyone who's done it the right way, but we still know there's some people who need to get the message. And that means sometimes making sure the enforcement is there to educate people and make clear we gotta have social distancing. So, now it is easier than ever when you see a crowd, when you see a line that's not distanced, when you see a supermarket that's too crowded, anything, you can report it right away so we can get help there to fix the problem. And now it's as simple as taking a photo. All you gotta do is take the photo and put the location with it, and bang, send a photo like this, and we will make sure that enforcement comes right away.
Enforcement comes right away.
But one of the things that you have to be able to do is to track people who are positive. Where were they? Who were they in contact with? How can you hem up any recurrence of this? Massachusetts has recently announced that they're going to try to build a statewide tracking program, and they've asked Partners in Health to run it for them. And they're one of my partners in the work we've done in Africa, Haiti, and other places. But where are we going to get all these contact tracers? Should we have, like you did with California did with the Conservation Corps of young people, should we have a contact tracer corps, even if we call it something more elegant? Should we really build the first public health network we've ever really built in this country around this issue?
I think the answer is absolutely yes, and I love the Massachusetts example. We were able to learn from them. We're all sharing best practices in real time. But this is an interesting point that's often not brought up. We have tracing capacity that predates COVID-19. It goes back to SARS, measles, TB, et cetera. Tracking and tracing capacity that exists in the county levels primarily, and increasing capacity at the state level. So what we're doing is we're building off that existing infrastructure and using the tools of technology to overlay. In addition to that, we're using AmeriCorps specifically. I thank you as a champion for AmeriCorps for decades. We've been able to take advantage of that workforce. Obviously, our Conservation Corps, what we have now is called Cal Volunteers in the spirit of Sarge Shriver. We are asking people, thousands of folks, to be part of this new corps, to get trained and to help us with the tracing, because you're absolutely right. The predicate for getting back to some semblance of normalcy is our ability to identify individuals through testing, to be able to trace their contacts, to isolate individuals that have either been exposed or quarantine people that are tested positive. And that's just going to require an army of folks and the capacity of consideration from individuals to allow for their privacy to be impacted by that kind of acuity of attention based upon where they've been and who they talked to.
Tase somebody over a mask.
Clear started rolling out its Health Pass, which is a touchless technology that tracks health insights for people looking to enter places of work. And we want to welcome Clear CEO Karen Seidman-Becker to the program this morning. Good morning to you. Most people know Clear by going to the airport. It was born after 9/11. This is another crisis with a new component that's being born. Explain what this product is in terms of how it's going to work relating to COVID.
So you're right, Clear was born out of 9/11, and it was about a public-private partnership leveraging innovation to enhance homeland security and delight customers. And that was really the beginning of Screening 1.0. And just like screening was forever changed post 9/11, in a post-COVID environment, you're going to see screening and public safety significantly shift, but this time it's beyond airports, right? It's sports stadium, it's retail, as Dana talked about, it's office buildings, it's restaurants. And so while we started with travel at our core, we're a biometric secure identity platform, where it's always been about attaching your identity to your boarding pass, the airport, or your ticket to get into a sports stadium, or your credit card to buy a beer. And so now with the launch of Clear Health Pass, it's about attaching your identity to your COVID-related health insights for employers, for employees, for customers. Everybody wants to know that each other's safe to start to reopen businesses and get America moving. And our North Star is about making...
Just to clarify one point about this, though, this program is not a testing program, though I imagine testing can be added to it. But this is about people answering questionnaires about their own health. And so the question is, how do you think about that in terms of creating a trusted environment?
Absolutely. You're right. This is not a testing platform. Just like airport screening is a multi-layered approach, Screening 2.0 is a multi-layered approach to buy down risk and increase confidence. So it starts from a mobile app perspective with facial, connecting your face to your identity and the questionnaire. You then bring that into the physical environment where it's about your questionnaire and then temperature. It's also then about linking, just like we built those links to tickets, it's about linking to lab companies and test data, and this will continue to evolve with social distancing, with masks, but it's about putting that whole picture together, those many layers. And ultimately the vaccine,
in terms of,
you are your vaccine.
Right. In terms of the cost of this to employers and also its relationship to the clear pass that people are used to using, both now at airports, but also at stadiums, are they connected? Is your identity connected? Is that information shared? These are, of course, then we get into the privacy issues.
Privacy issues.
Let me put it very clearly. You have no constitutional right to endanger the public and spread a disease, even if you disagree. You have no right not to be vaccinated. You have no right not to wear a mask. You have no right to open up your business.
Wait, can I stop you? No right not to be vaccinated, meaning if they decide you have to be vaccinated, we have to be vaccinated?
Absolutely. And if you refuse to be vaccinated, the state has the power to literally take you to a doctor's office and plunge a needle into your arm. If the vaccination
Where is that in the Constitution?
Now we have Joe in the White House, and we also have a new fear to exploit. If you thought COVID-19 isn't a good enough excuse to submit to the total panopticon surveillance grid, there's now the threat of domestic terrorism in the wake of the Capitol insurrection. You know, that time when people who were simultaneously the biggest idiots on the planet and the gravest threat to American democracy stormed into the Capitol through the doors that the police left open for them before proceeding to take an unauthorized tour. President Biden and his lackeys have already vowed to create new domestic anti-terrorism legislation, and their mainstream media apologists can be heard serving up words like sedition, treason, and insurrection like hotcakes on Saturday morning. Maybe they can just pass the anti-terrorism bill the notorious slime bag Adam Schiff has been proposing since 2019 that would amend foreign anti-terrorism legislation to allow the government to invoke all those same powers used against foreign terrorists against domestic terrorists. Calls for an even greater surveillance state have been made, and social media posts encouraging people to snitch out their fellow Americans to the FBI have been posted all across the internet. Speaking of, the ongoing march towards total censorship on social media has picked up at breakneck speed ever since January 6th. Many Americans have celebrated the former president being banned from social media without even thinking twice about what it means that Silicon Valley can silence the President of the United States at will.
I think the reality is that what you're seeing, all this activity by the FBI, by law enforcement to go after and arrest people, that's all great, but that's all right of the boom. And in intelligence, you really want to be left of the boom. You want to be way out ahead of the events. And I think we're going to have to reset our entire intelligence approach to these white supremacist militias, these dangerous ultra-nationalist organizations. I think we're going to have to look at a greater surveillance of them. The FBI is going to have to run confidential sources. We're going to have to penetrate these plots long before they present a violent threat to our democracy if we want to have any hope of stopping these in the future.
That gets to a really core issue with how our freedoms as Americans and the way we've treated press freedom in the past is being abused by these actors. In that we have given a lot of leeway, both in the traditional media and on social media, to people to have a very broad range of political views. And that becomes a huge challenge of figuring out how do you bring those people back into the mainstream of fact-based reporting and try to get us all back into the same consensual reality.
And is that possible? Seems like that's an open question.
It's hard. I mean, I think we got to do a couple things. One, there needs to be an intentional work by the social media companies collaborating together to work on violent extremism in the same way they worked on ISIS. When I started at Facebook in 2015, the number one challenge from a content perspective was the abuse of social media by the Islamic State. And there was a collaboration between the tech companies and between the tech companies and law enforcement to make it impossible for them to use the internet to recruit and radicalize mostly young Muslim men at the time around the world. Now we're talking about domestic audience in the United States.
And again, it's not us saying so, John Hammond. That is a bulletin released to all law enforcement earlier this week that there is, until the end of April, a persistent threat of domestic extremism, domestic terrorism carried out in the ideology and around this belief that the election was fraudulent, that the COVID restrictions are unnecessary. All of those ideologies pushed by Donald Trump. But my question for you is around incitement. We had a policy, and it was very controversial. It was carried out under the Bush years and under the Obama years, of attacking terrorism at its root, of going after and killing, and in the case of Amr al-Awlaki, an American, a Yemeni American, with a drone strike for the crime of inciting violence, inciting terrorism. Mitch McConnell was in the Senate then. He was in the Senate after 9/11 too. How does Mitch McConnell, who understands that the way you root out terrorism is to take on, in the case of Islamic terrorism, kill those who incite it, how does he not vote to convict someone that he said on the floor of the Senate incited an insurrection?
It's not about left versus right. It's about the top versus the bottom. And if we don't stand together against the elite class now, we might not be able to later. None of this is about coronavirus or domestic terrorism. This is about control. And new developments in technology will only make the type of authoritarian excesses humanity has witnessed in their past more effective. There's a fate worse than death: to be constantly monitored and surveilled, censored and silenced, exploited and controlled. So what do you have to say about your fate? It may not be long before somebody makes that decision for you.